With Liquor Barn, you can shop your favorite bourbon, that perfect bottle of wine, or discover something new. To place an order for pickup or delivery, download the Liquor Barn app, visit liquorbarn.com, or call your nearest Liquor Barn location. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our email list for all the latest news on products, promotions, and events. Liquor Barn, where Kentuckians go to celebrate life. Cheers!
Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, live tonight in the Bourbon Life Studios. We're back in the studio. My good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing, man?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing great, man. We had a great time last week, right? We were live on location over at Liquor Barn in Hamburg, recorded.
That's right. We took the show on the road, and the week before that, we had the crew. So
yeah.
We've been kind of spoiled.
We have been,
One
man.
might say we have great guests, great locations.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun last week with Brad
We haven't
Williams
do
over
the
there.
computer in a while.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, man. So that's right. We haven't
Yeah.
recorded online, man. So this is fun. We are actually live tonight, back in the Bourbon Life Studios with live guests in the studio with us. So I'm really excited
That's
about
right.
that.
We did. We roped a couple guests in here tonight, so we're again.
Yeah, drug them down to the basement. Yeah.
Well, when you say it like that.
Oh, man. All right. Well, Matt, I'm happy to be back, man. I'm glad you're here with me, as always. You got a big week coming up, Matt. I'm going to talk about that, man. I got to brag on you, right? You got a big weekend?
Let's not brag until it's over with.
Yeah, come on. This show comes out Friday. So, Matt, you got a big event on Sunday. So once people hear this, it'll be the weekend probably. So you've got Ironman Lake Placid coming up, right?
That's the plan.
Yeah, man. So you excited about that?
Yeah, I am. I'm looking forward to it. I'm not gonna get any more ready in the week coming here. So we'll see what we've got on the day. We'll go out there and give all 140.6 miles a go.
Yeah. So for all the people out there that do marathons or are training for triathlon, you know, this is taper week, right? So Matt is tapering down on his training. So how you handling that, man? You doing all right with it?
Yeah, a little bit of a bridezilla, but holding on okay.
Yeah. Well, we won't make you drink too much bourbon, man. We know you got a big weekend coming up. So we don't want to get you too drunk tonight.
Hey, I appreciate it. But more than just me, we don't want to talk
Let's
about
move on.
Yeah,
well, I do want to talk about you, Matt.
We brought some great guests.
We did, man. Why don't you tell everybody who we have with us tonight, Matt?
I sure will, Mark. We have the co-founders of Kentucky Senator Bourbon, Damon Thayer and Andre Regard. Gentlemen, welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here, guys. This is a pretty impressive setup you've got here in the studio, the Bourbon Life Studio. Very impressive.
Well, I appreciate it. It's kind of weird when you tell people, hey, why don't you come over? You can come to my house. And I'm like, you can come to my studio. It's in my house. And it's like, by the way, you're coming down to my basement.
This is hardly a basement. When I grew up with a basement, it was nothing like this.
Okay.
The basement I have is a glorified crawl space, if even. So,
Yeah.
This is the Tajma basement of
Okay.
basements.
All right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that.
If you're a bourbon geek like all of us are, everyone should know that we're imbibing. Well, we're not imbibing. We're just soaking in the spirit, figuratively, of all the bourbon surrounding us here in your basement.
Yeah. I need to I'm going to work on a centralized shelving system back here to where I can display everything, because there are bottles all over the basement here. But one of these days, maybe, hopefully I'll get that set up. But we're really happy to have you guys here. And this is a kind of a funny story. Damon, you and I just happened to meet by chance a couple of weeks ago. It was funny. I was driving through a parking lot. I saw you walking out of the store and just stopped. I'm like, oh, excuse me, are you Damon Thayer? And so we talked, and I was like, we need to get you on our show, man.
Yeah, in addition to being a bourbon purveyor with my business partner, Andre, I'm a bourbon collector and bourbon drinker like most of your listeners. And I was checking in at the Hamburg Liquor Barn to see what they had. And we also knew that they had put out probably a case or half a case or so of last year's release our 6-year release, which we're going to talk about later. And I knew the 7-year was coming up and we were running low on the 6-year. So I went in to buy a couple bottles for my own personal collection.
Very nice.
By the way, people think that we've got just tons of our own bourbon laying around.
Yeah.
Not true. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our investors. And then there's also this thing called the Kentucky 3-tier system that doesn't allow us just to walk out of the distillery with cases and cases of our own bourbon.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, we've experienced that somewhat in barrel picks. We've done a few barrel picks, and it's people think, oh, you do a barrel pick, you get all these bottles. It's like, no, you really don't. You can buy those bottles.
You buy all of those bottles.
Yeah, you can buy them if you're lucky. But yeah, you're going to have to buy those bottles. You're not just going to walk out with 8 free cases of bourbon. So people don't understand that sometimes. So guys, let's talk about real quick before we jump in and have a conversation. Let's talk about what we've got poured up for this first round. So either one of you want to jump in and share what we're going to be drinking.
This is our first release of Kentucky Senator Bourbon, and all your listeners should know we're an NDP, a non-distiller producer.
Okay.
We can get into the story of how we started or restarted Kentucky Senator Bourbon later in the show. But to start off with some tasting, this is our 15-year Alben Barkley release. The first release was in February of 2021. And this is a mash bill of 78.5% corn, 13% rye, 8.5% malted barley. Like all releases of Kentucky Senator, it's bottled at the traditional 107 barrel proof.
Okay.
And like I said, it's aged 15 years, very high rye bourbon. And we had about 1,300 bottles of it.
Okay.
We bought a tote.
Okay.
And we bottled every single drop of it.
Nice. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because I know some people when they source or they buy barrels, et cetera, but these weren't actually, it wasn't actually barrels, right? So you bought a tote.
Not on this release. And we have a great story about our tote too. I'm the marketing and branding guy. Andre is the lawyer and handles the myriad of legal complex issues you have to get through.
Thank
in the
God
bourbon
for
business.
lawyers, right? Andre, let's like power twins here, man.
Yeah, we're a good team, but in order to keep possession of our sought after trademark, Andre had to jump through some hoops during a very cold weekend in February of 2021.
That's right. Our bourbon was on its way, and the ice storm hit, and our bourbon got stuck in transit.
Oh, man.
And then it made it as far as the Old Dominion warehouse behind the Amazon facility, at which point we had to go and get it because they had nobody that could short haul it to our bottler. So my ex-wife's boyfriend volunteered his 2,500 Dodge pickup truck that we then loaded with a tote of bourbon and delivered to our bottler, who kindly proceeded to bottle it for us.
So it was kind of like moonshiners. You got the stuff in the back of the truck or on a trailer, just hauling it down the road, right?
Literally our entire investment of our company. Riding,
nice.
Coming across New Circle Road over to Bluegrass Distillers on West 6th.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Transported by his ex-wife's husband in the back of his pickup truck on a cold February morning. It sounds like a country song.
It does. And Andre just showed me a picture on his phone. That was classic. That's great. Too bad we don't have video, man, to share that. But that's awesome. I can't imagine watching that, seeing that rolling down the road. That would be
we
great.
had to get the juice in the bottle and on the shelf within a specific time period. Otherwise, our trademark would have expired.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. I didn't know that. We could talk about that more later because I'm curious to know more about that. As an attorney, obviously, kind of like, really? Okay. Interesting. I'd like to know that. So let's talk about the bourbon. Matt, tell me what you're picking up on the nose on this one, man.
It's not as overly oaky as I was expecting. I was thinking with 15 years, it was going to have a fair amount of oak behind it, but it's got a nice balance of it in there. I also pick up really bright vanilla, and it's quite fruity. There's like a lot of cherry, a lot of strawberry.
Yeah, a lot of berry in there, a lot of cherry for
on
sure.
it as well, like a little bit of apricot, like some like kind of getting into some darker red, like a balance between citrus and dark red fruit.
Yeah.
I think kind of like the apricot comes across to me.
Some sweetness. I get like a little brown sugar type of aroma maybe to it. But yeah, very, very sweet, very nice. Not oaky at all. And Damon, I see you moving your glass around over there, and this one It's clinging to the glass. The legs on it's gorgeous.
You know, every good bourbon man likes a good pair of legs.
That's right.
No doubt about it. Yeah, this is nice as I'm swirling it around to watch it cling to the glass and run down the sides. Definitely like it. So what about you guys? What do you pick up? What's it stand out to you on the nose on this?
Well, like Matt said, for a 15-year-old bourbon, I think it's surprisingly sweet.
Yeah.
And like you said, a lot of the fruit forward elements. We got great reviews. Our website and our Instagram page, Kentucky Senator Bourbon, are full of great reviews from this first bourbon. And as a matter of fact, just a couple months ago, we got a Fred Minnick Ascot Gold Award.
Nice. For
this release. And it ended up on Fred's list at 42 out of 100 on the best whiskeys of 2021. And we were the top 15-year-old whiskey on the list.
Really? Wow, that's great. Congratulations on that for sure.
So one of the things Damon and I did when we got it and we were trying to decide how to bottle it is we decided to proof it down to 107.
Okay.
A lot of people don't recognize that 107 is actually a very historic proof number.
Right.
You know, some people said we should proof it at what it came in, you know, just not barrel proof effectively. Other people said, hey, bring it down to 94 and get more. But we decided that we're going to consistently stick with 107 for all of our bottlings.
Yeah.
So we can at least have one consistent one consistent theme.
Sure.
Which should be 107, which, you know, which makes it not quite as hot.
Yeah.
Makes it a little bit more drinkable, but you're still getting a little bit more punch.
Yeah. You know, on the nose at 107, it's not hot. Or what people would say is hot. This doesn't burn your nose at all. And I just poured this, or we just poured this out of the bottle. So it's not like it's been sitting in the glass for 15 or 20 minutes. So this is very, from the nose aspect of it, it's very approachable. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, it's really, it's well blended together. It doesn't seem like there are any aromas or anything that really punch through everything else. It's got a really nice balance. It delivers on a lot of great notes. There's nothing offensively like overwhelming in it. I think it's got a very mature nose without the presence of too much oak or too much wood.
Yep, I agree with that. So guys, let's talk about who you guys are. That's part of the fun of this show is we get to know our guests. We get to talk to you about where you come from, what you've done in the past, and how you got into the bourbon industry. So whoever wants to go first, Andre, Damon's pointing at you, man. So it looks like you're up.
We go in alphabetical order.
Oh, there you go. Andre's first.
I grew up in South Louisiana, so I'm Cajun by heritage. Grew up cooking. And
no, wait a second. Are you an LSU fan, or are you converted to UK yet?
I'm an LSU fan. I'm a Georgetown Hoyas basketball fan.
Okay.
I went to school in D.C., but LSU fan through and through. So I moved to D.C. and went to college in D.C. and was commissioned in the Navy after I graduated college. And then I spent a few years in the Navy working with our good sailors and Marines on aircraft carriers and submarines and doing things like that. And then moved to Kentucky in 1999 and got involved in the horse business. And for about 10 years, all I did was horses, and that's actually how I met Damon. Was through horse connections. Right. But in moving to Kentucky, I did some family history. Didn't really know it when I was young, but it turned out that my great-grandfather had gone to high school in Bardstown at the old St. Joseph's Jesuit high school, or it was called a college at that time, St. Joe's College, still there as a preparatory school, and married a girl from Bardstown. And they got married in Louisville in 1889. And her father, they got married in a few years after that. I think it was 1889. Her father was the founder of Old Granddad Whiskey.
Really?
No kidding.
So, and my grandfather was Ferriol Regard. My middle name is Ferriol, and the woman he married's last name was Ferriol, spelled slightly different. And it was Barbara Ferriol. Hayden is the original Old Granddad Whiskey. So didn't know this history and learned it when I got here and drank a lot of bourbon growing up, drank a lot of bourbon in college. And Damon came to me and said he had this idea. So we had a shared interest in horses and a shared interest in history and a shared interest in bourbon. And that's kind of how we got launched. But I'm an attorney. I practice in Lexington. Own my own firm, and I'm involved in a few other ventures as well.
Very nice.
Do some real estate stuff, and I own a a mail order company with my brother where we specialize in pecan products, pecan candies, and pecan.
Nice. Out of Louisiana, right?
Based out of Louisiana.
Yeah, very, very nice. So we got two attorneys in the same room tonight, so everybody watch out, right? So.
Right. We'll find something to agree on.
That's right, man. That's great. Damon,
You know what I know about pecans?
What do you know about pecans?
It's the state tree of Texas.
That's correct.
Well, there you go. Very nice.
There it is. All right, I'm
There
out.
you go. That Matt's out.
It's been great. It's been a good show, everybody.
See you later,
See
Matt.
you on the other side.
Thanks for stopping by. All right, Damon, what about you? Tell us a little bit about tell us about your background.
Well, like the Johnny Cash song, I was born in Saginaw, Michigan, but I did not fall in love with the daughter of a Saginaw fisherman. I grew up in northern Michigan, went to Michigan State. I have no background in the bourbon business. I can remember, at my parents' old deer hunting cabin, I can remember my dad and his hunting buddies passing around Crown Royal and Canadian Club and that kind of crap.
Right.
And that would be about the only exposure I ever had to whiskey as a kid. I moved to Kentucky 30 years ago to work at Turfway Park in northern Kentucky.
Okay.
I'm a marketing and communications guy by trade. And then I did that for 7 years. And then I worked for 8 years at the Breeders' Cup here in Lexington.
Okay.
Which is why I moved from northern Kentucky to Georgetown 22 years ago. I got sidetracked into politics.
Yeah.
I ran for the state Senate in a special election in 2003. And I'm now the Senate Majority Floor Leader in Kentucky. I'm the longest serving Republican in that position. And I've been in the Senate almost 19 and a half years. Started working with the bourbon industry folks about 10 years ago or so, right before the bourbon boom started. And, I'm a traditional Reagan conservative Republican. And one of my mantras is I want to help remove artificial barriers to free enterprise.
Sure.
And as you all know, post-prohibition, there are a lot of artificial barriers that were set up for the liquor business in Kentucky. And it sort of just came naturally to me to help remove some of those. And so consequently, I started going to tour bourbon distilleries and got interested in bourbon, started collecting hard to find bottles.
Yeah.
And then I stumbled across this brand, Kentucky Senator Bourbon, which is a lapsed bourbon brand that was originally distilled by Krigler and Krigler in northern Kentucky. And eventually it made its way to Bardstown, where it was bottled by Double Springs Distillers. And then we've sort of lost the trail. We don't know what happened, but it went out of business. I stumbled on the brand and I went to Andre and said, hey, I've got this idea. I want to bring back this lapsed bourbon brand. And we know the Pinhook guys from the horse racing business.
Right,
and
yeah.
so I knew about their releases that are named for each one of their Bourbon Lane stable racehorses.
Right.
And I said, I want to do this bourbon and name each release after a U.S. Senator from Kentucky.
That makes sense.
And initially I went to Andre as my lawyer for my consulting business that I'm in. And he said, well, let's just be 50-50 partners. He said, you do the marketing and branding, I'll do the legal work, and we'll figure everything else out.
Nice.
And so here we are.
Yeah.
And we raised a little bit of capital, put in some of our own, launched the company on, really a shoestring, and here we are.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because you mentioned Pinhook, and we've had Sean on the show, and he's a great guy. Absolutely love Sean, and I love Pinhook. I don't know, you can look over there on the piano, and there's probably at least 14 or 15.
I can see it. I can see the wax
bottles, and there's probably another 10 or 12 in the closets over here. So, but yeah, I'm a big fan of what they do. So that's cool that you guys are doing that you name your releases after that. But you both obviously have had a varied background in terms of what your experience has been, and it's really cool that you guys have come together to release this brand and share with us what you guys have managed to put together. So Matt, let's jump back to the bourbon. And let's talk about the palate and the finish on this. What do you get on this 15-year? This is the Alben Barkley, right?
The Alben Barkley release.
Yeah, which is named after Senator Barkley, who was a U.S. Senator from Kentucky.
That's right, from Western Kentucky. Lake Barkley is named for him.
Right.
He was vice president under Harry S. Truman.
Yeah.
And he died while giving a speech at William and Mary in Virginia.
I did not know that.
He gave his speech and finished the speech and then dropped dead on the stage of a heart attack.
Wow. No, yeah. I did not know that.
He was a pretty compelling guy. And just to show you how cheeky I can be, we named our first bourbon after an anti-gambling, anti-drinking Democrat. And obviously I'm pro-horse racing, pro-bourbon, and a Republican.
Oh my gosh, that's an awesome story.
That is part of our theme of our bourbon, is to have good bourbon with a good story and a good dose of history. So Damon mentioned each of our releases, and we'll talk about each of them tonight, are each named after a different. It has to be a U.S. senator from Kentucky. Therefore, we also committed to never having less than a 6-year-old release. So
okay.
Minimum
it makes sense. Yeah,
Senate
6-year terms. Yeah,
and we'll get into the second release shortly, but the second release was a 1-termer, so a 6-year bourbon.
Okay.
6-year term. So it's been fun looking at the books of history and looking at the different senators and trying to pick ones that we think can work.
Yeah, well, that's cool that you guys started with Barkley and Lake Barkley, like you said. Obviously, anybody that's familiar with that. Beautiful lake down there, Kentucky Lake as well, and land between the lakes, that whole area.
Barkley voted for prohibition.
It's also been interesting because now that we've gotten into the third release, we've had people contact us from different areas, or they have some sort of historical connection or an interest in and they're particular about it.
Yeah.
Like, we're the Northern Kentucky guys, or that was a relative of mine. We had a gentleman call us from England who was related to Senator DeBoe, who's our second release.
Yeah.
And specifically wanted a bottle because of the historical.
Very nice.
Of the family.
Yeah.
So you've got to find some angles in this business.
Yeah. But it's funny you mentioned that, because it made me think of, there's a guy, Paul Letgo, who owns Few Spirits up in Illinois. And I don't know if you're familiar with their brand or not, but Paul actually named his brand Few Spirits, which are actually the initials of the woman who started the temperance movement before Prohibition. So her initials were FEW. So his brand is called Few Spirits, and everything is released under that Few Spirits. So kind of a funny little story there as well. So cool that you guys have decided to do that. Matt, let's talk about the palate and the finish on this one.
Let's do it. It's got that familiar rye right on the tip of the tongue, nice peppery. That's where the heat's coming through, and a little bit of that oak, a little bit of age.
Yeah.
Starting to taste on the palate as well. Then it leads into really bright vanilla and some nutty aromas and characters to it. I get like that kind of a smooth peanut, almost like a wafery type, like inside of a Kit Kat type taste.
Okay.
For some reason, really sings to me. So there's like a little bit of chocolate, it's sweet, a little bit of caramel, but nice mature flavors as well. There's a little bit of red fruit in the finish, like some nice plum, or like almost like a raisin, but just like really luscious red wine, like dark, smooth type flavors at the end. But overall, drinks really, really well.
Yeah,
absolutely delicious.
This is not one. Yeah, if I had a bottle, this would be one that would be empty pretty soon. You struggle to have to pace yourself to drink this one. But I agree, Matt. Lots of that cherry, we talked about, that comes through for me on the palate. The cherry, the spiciness from that rye comes through as well. Mm-hmm. I like that combination. Again, you get that sweetness, but you also get that spiciness from that rye that lingers on the palate. And it's a really nice combination of flavors. A very nice finish. It's not a super long finish, but it's a very nice finish, and lots of different flavors that keep kind of coming to the forefront throughout the length of the finish. So, Damon, what about you? What do you get in terms of the palate and the finish on this one?
The peppery part comes through a little more on the finish than it does on the front end.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. It's not a super long finish, but it's a good finish.
Sure.
You're saying a lot of the things that people like Fred Minnick said. And some of the
I should
other
have worn my
reviews.
ascot.
That's exactly right.
Andre, what about you?
I just think it's a good drinker.
Yeah.
It's smooth. It has enough spice when you're drinking it that you know it's there. A little bit of the cherry comes out that you mentioned earlier, but I think all in all, it's just a great sipping bourbon.
Yeah.
You have a little bit of it, it'll catch up with you after a while. That 107 will pop you at the end. After your second or third glass, but
again, it's not a hot drinker, which
not
is
at all.
When you say 107 proof, some people are like, oh my gosh, that's really high proof, but this does not. It doesn't nose as a high proof, Matt. It doesn't. What do you think? I mean, it doesn't really drink hot.
I thought it actually brought a good bit of spice right up front. I was really happy with, not like in a hot, high alcohol way, but I think it punches its age right at the front, and the spice lingering on the finish shows a lot of the maturity. But no, I never thought for a moment that it drank overly hot.
So now this was something you guys bought in a tote. We saw the picture, which is great to see. So can you talk about where it was sourced from, where it came from?
We can't confirm or deny because our broker would not reveal it.
I got
but
you.
we're fairly certain that it's Knob Creek bourbon from Jim Beam.
Okay.
And there was a lot of other 15-year-old juice that was on the market at that time.
Yeah.
I'd like to note that according to Fred Minnick, we were the best of the 15-year bourbons last year.
Very nice.
And so our tote was a good tote.
Yeah.
And so we think it's probably 15-year Knob Creek, and I'm still scratching my head to this day why Jim Beam ever put that stuff out onto the secondary market, but I'm really glad they did.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think it might have had to do with the tariffs that were taking place.
Okay.
This would have been the 2019 tariff squeeze that would have happened.
Okay.
And
They were looking to. Yeah.
So when Damon and I started this, he first came to me in 2017, I think it was. So we spent 2.5 years doing a lot of starts and stops, directional things. What are you going to do? What are you thinking about doing? Different investors, different programs set up. And at one point, we had a pretty elaborate program set up with a major barrel investor when we then realized it wasn't Kentucky product.
Oh, okay.
So we weren't able to pursue that. And because in Kentucky, if you're going to have Kentucky on it, then rightfully it needs to be Kentucky product.
And I voted for that law about 5 years ago.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that in the third round. I want to talk about some Kentucky law and the things that have changed. That
we had a great lead on some great MGP bourbon, and then we're like, oops, it says Kentucky on the label. It has to be juice that was distilled and aged in Kentucky. So all of our bourbons are distilled in Kentucky, aged in Kentucky, and bottled right here in Lexington at Bluegrass Distillers.
Great.
So it was an interesting process trying to source the juice.
Sure.
Organize all that. Then we went out and we met the different bottlers. We interviewed 4 or 5 different bottlers, and then we finally settled on the guys at Bluegrass Distillery, which is located right here in Lexington, and that's been a fantastic relationship.
Yeah.
It's nice to support the home team and help them with what they're doing.
And a fellow attorney.
Another attorney, that's
Sam
correct.
Rock. We were actually in law school together. So
Matt, we're surrounded by them.
Why do you think I'm closest to the stairs and the door over here?
People ask me if I'm an attorney, and I said, no, I just make the laws.
yeah, that's right. You make the laws, and we get to interpret or enforce or not enforce or help people break them. No, I'm just kidding.
Learn what you can and can't do.
That's exactly right. We can help them find out where they can walk the line, right? So
where the traps are.
Yeah. Well, guys, this has been great. Matt, what are your final thoughts on this 15-year-old?
Absolutely.
Yeah, man, I could crush this. Talking about the 15-year-old, because I know Chicken Cock came out with their 15-year-old. Pretty sure, probably the same. I didn't have any of that, but we did get to try the Whiskey Drummer from 3 Chord. And those guys, I'm pretty sure that's probably the same kind of.
So we did taste 3 different totes, and it was interesting. They were all quite different.
Yeah.
I mean, you can keep the story in or not, but we very deliberately tasted our totes, but then we liked the first one, and we called them, and they said it's been sold, and we liked the second one, and we called them, and they said it's been sold, and we tasted the third one, we called them, and we said, where do we send the money? And that was kind of the story on that. But it was a great opportunity. But they are different. The advantages of buying a tote, of course, is you know how much bourbon you're getting.
Sure, right.
And you go to the market and you buy 50 barrels. There's no guarantee how much bourbon's going to be in any of those barrels.
Right.
I mean, there's ranges. If they pick up a barrel and it's empty, they're not going to sell it to you.
Sure.
If it's got liquid in it, it's going to be part of the load.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. I didn't think about that. So, well, guys, I tell you what, we're at the end of round 1. So let's take a quick break. We'll come back round 2, move on to the next drink, and we'll be back with more with Damon Thayer and Andre Regard with Kentucky Senator Bourbon in just a minute. Spirits of French Lick crafts their spirits using only the finest agricultural product that has defined character, following their motto, respect the grain. They lead the way in representing the quality of the Hoosier artisan distilling process while paying tribute to its inseparable past. By implementing best practices from those early times, combined with modern touches, Spirits of French Lick has created a truly unique place in the industry. Spirits of French Lick products are distributed throughout Indiana, Kentucky, and Missouri, and can also be purchased online through Sealbox at sealbox.com. Visit spiritsoffrenchlick.com to learn more information and make sure to follow them on Facebook and Instagram.
The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise right here in the heart of bourbon country. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day that features an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring local distilleries. Be sure to check them out online at thestavekentucky.com or at Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky.
All right, everybody, welcome back for round session, period, whatever you want to call it, number 2 of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me tonight, live in the Bourbon Life Studios, is my good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing over there, man?
Good, Mark. We're back for the second term.
That's,
if you will.
Matt, you are on it, dude.
He's picked up on the thematic elements right away.
I'm telling you, Matt is sharp as a tack, and he always comes up with these great little one-liners. So good job, Matt. That's great.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Again, it's my one for the night, so I'm out, guys.
You're out. See you later, Matt.
Yep.
Peace out, man.
Yeah, but we are back, and we've got the co-founders of Kentucky Senator Bourbon, Damon Thayer and Andre Regard, with us. And what do we have poured up here for our second drink of the night?
Well, this is the second release of Kentucky Senator Bourbon. It came out during the summer of 2021. It is like all Kentucky Senator Bourbon, proof down to 107, about 1,300 bottles. It's aged 6 years. The mash bill is 75% corn, 21% rye, and 4% malted barley. And it's a completely different mash bill because it was sourced from a different distillery than release number 1. And it actually came from, we bought barrels, I should say. Okay. All bourbon comes from barrels, but as noted in the first segment, the Barkley release came to us in a tote. We actually bought barrels that will get us through 4 years of bourbon releases.
Oh, okay.
And this was the first.
All right, great. And can you say where this came from? These barrels came from?
Again, we can't confirm or deny. Our broker would not tell us for sure.
Okay.
But we're fairly certain that this came from the Barton Distillery in Bardstown.
Okay, which you can no longer go visit and do a tour at, right? They shut that down, which was so disappointing because we got to do a barrel pick with Liquor Barn back in December and had a good time there. So kind of disappointed that you can't do that anymore. But anyway.
It is disappointing. I don't know if they're trying to push all their tours to Buffalo Trace,
right,
in Frankfurt, or there are so many new experiences down there, like Lux Row and Bardstown Bourbon Company that have added to Maker's Mark, Willett, and Heaven Hill. Maybe they just decided to give up that particular revenue stream.
Right. Yeah, which makes sense because huge investments. We can talk about that too a little bit later. But Heaven Hill, obviously, huge investment. Bardstown Bourbon Company has done a phenomenal job. Kentucky Owl getting ready to build the Kentucky Owl Park down there, 400 or whatever acres, I think, of whatever they're going to build, which is going to be crazy. So yeah, 1792, obviously it's a kind of older facility. Not a lot of huge fancy things going on there, but still, it was we had a fun time going to visit and hanging out in the Rick House, picking barrels, right?
Absolutely, we did.
Yeah.
But the place really gives off an aura of production to me.
Industrial.
Yeah.
I think you said that when we were walking to the Rick House. You're like, it reminded you of, what did it remind you of?
Of refinery, oil
refinery. Yeah. So
I've done the tour and I think that's probably a pretty good assessment, but it's good bourbon and we got some good juice from them.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the juice. Matt, what do you pick up in terms of the nose? Just to clarify, this is a 6-year-old, right? 6-year-old one. Oh, there you go. Nice.
Had to get that bottle pop in there, the cork pop. This is a 6-year-old bourbon.
Yeah, 6-year-old, 107 proof like the first one. This is the William DeBoe release, round number 2. So, Matt, what do you pick up in terms of the nose on it?
Right off the start, I got a nice nose of marshmallow.
Okay.
And then it's leading way. There's a higher rye content. I get that fresh rye bread aromas coming through, like a little bit of the caraway, some of like the yeast that you would just think of from like nice hot fresh rye bread out of the oven, kind of that sharp crisp rye flavor and aroma. There's like a little bit of a zest with it as well.
Yeah, and this one is 21% rye, so we're talking 8% rye higher. So that makes sense that you'd pick that up for sure. No doubt about it.
Almost like a little dill.
Yeah, okay. I can see that. Yeah.
We're going to have Matt write our tasting notes from here on out.
I'm just telling you. That's what, Andre, you and I were talking when we were upstairs earlier before we started the show. Matt's palate is, I love him as a friend. He's great to do the show with, but I couldn't do it by myself. There's no way, just because his ability to pick out notes, not just from the nosing, but from the palate as well. It's pretty amazing what he does. So
it's just about saying it confidently enough. Everybody will soon believe you.
You could be in politics, Matt.
Oh man, competition now, Matt. We're gonna run for office, right?
Yeah.
You got to start local though. We got to figure out something here. Run for the council, maybe.
You're the mayor of Liquor Barn.
I am the mayor of Liquor Barn. You're right.
So when we decided to bottle this particular bourbon, one of our biggest supporters has been Liquor Barn. We've got a great relationship with Liquor Barn through Kentucky Eagle, who's our distributor, and Brad Williams, who you mentioned earlier, came over to Kentucky to Bluegrass Distillers. We pulled the 7 barrels, the 6 barrels that we were going to use for our release that year, and Brad and a couple of his team members came down, and we. Damon and I were there, and the guys from Bluegrass Distillers and a couple of our investors, and we went ahead and picked a single barrel for them.
Oh, yeah.
And then we took the remaining barrels that we had taken off out of the rick house and went ahead and did a small batch out of those.
Very nice.
So Brad's kind of led the way for us in some of our 6 and 7 year releases for us picking out.
Man, he's just such a good guy. I mean,
he's a great guy to spend a morning drinking bourbon with. And so with our second release, we started a new tradition where there's a single barrel store pick at every Liquor Barn, Depths in Northern Kentucky, and Party Mart in Louisville. They've got 23 stores around the Commonwealth. And for us and for our distributor, Kentucky Eagle, knowing that Liquor Barn is going to buy a huge chunk of cases right off the bat is a really nice feeling.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, no doubt about it.
And having Brad Williams associated with the store pick, I mean, you can't buy, that's social media gold.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Brad is a great guest. He's one of the few people we've had on the show twice, and we just recorded, actually the show that's out this week was with him. We recorded it live up at Liquor Barn. Just a great guy. Brought some single barrels. He invited us to go with him, like I said earlier, to Barton's. We picked a full proof 1792 back in December. But yeah, man, he's a great guy to have on your side. So there's no doubt about it. So guys, I didn't ask you all, Damon, Andre, what do you guys get in terms of the nose on this 6-year-old?
I get a little fruit, almost like a little banana.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. Which is a Barton.
Yeah,
the Barton yeast
very
strain, right?
common Barton.
Yeah.
Barton.
That's what everyone says.
Okay.
Banana, very, very Barton forward. And we're like, okay, that's what we think it is. And we're happy to be associated with that. You know,
Yep.
As an NDP, we've taken the approach that we're going to be very transparent about everything we do. We put the age statement on there.
Yeah.
The mash bill is on the website at KentuckySenatorBourbon.com. We're happy to tell in people like you in media interviews where we think it came from. And when I was just a consumer, now I'm a consumer and a purveyor. I very much like aging statements on my bourbon, and I like transparency. I value transparency, and so we've made that a hallmark of our brand.
Good.
Absolutely. If your bourbon's got nothing to hide behind, why make it hide behind something? If it's all right there and good enough to stand for its own.
The key, what we've learned, and we're still rookies at this, but the key is A, you've got to have good juice, and B, it helps to have a really great story.
Sure.
And so, our story is we're selling great Kentucky bourbon with a side of Kentucky history.
Right.
Very few people knew about William J. DeBoe, and he turned out he was the first Republican to ever represent Kentucky in the Senate. And it took until the late 1890s, because Kentucky, for the longest time, has been a heavy Democrat state. We had a fair number of Whigs,
Right.
and then mostly Democrats. And he sort of got in by accident because back then the legislature chose the U.S. Senator. That was before the Constitution was changed, about a little less than 100 years ago, that led to the direct election of U.S. Senators.
Right.
And there was a brief period of time where the Republicans had control of the House and the Democrats in the Senate were split. So he was able to put together a coalition of the Republicans in the House and enough disaffected Democrats in the Senate that he was elected to 1 6-year term, which is why we chose him, because this is a 6-year bourbon.
Yeah. Nice.
And then he got booted out 6 years later because the Democrats got back in, and they were able to put their own man in the U.S. Senate.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty cool story, and there's 50 some U.S. senators from Kentucky that we have to choose from, and only 2 of them are living. And those would be the current occupants of the office, Rand Paul and Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I was going to say, because Mitch has been in there for 40...
Since he was elected in 1984, so he was sworn in
almost 40 years.
In 1985.
Yeah, and Rand's been there for 2 terms, 3 terms?
Yeah, this is the last term of Rand's second term. Last year of his second term, he's running for a 3rd term this fall. Rand once said to me, he says, "Do I have to die for you to name one of these bourbons after me?" And I said, "Well, actually, yes, you do, so please don't."
Well, he could give us special permission if he wanted to.
Yeah.
He could.
There you go.
But they both have a bottle of our first release.
Okay.
And, and kind of sticking with our political theme, we've been fortunate. You guys might be familiar with Jack Rose's whiskey in Washington, D.C.
Jack Rose Dining Saloon, the number 1 whiskey bar in America.
Yep.
Correct. Bill Thomas, who's the owner, has also carried our bourbon up there. So each release, we have a certain number of cases that go to D.C.
Nice. That's
so that
perfect fit for it there.
Yeah, it is.
The other politicians in D.C. can come and get some of our bourbon, or if we need to buy some while we're in D.C., we can do that. So it's been pretty neat. Also, our online distributor is associated with Justin's House of Bourbon, and they distribute out of D.C.
Oh, okay.
And that's Bourbon Outfitters.
Yeah, okay, great. So you guys can ship, they can ship and sell.
We can ship anywhere
in the
anybody
US.
that can, anybody who can take it from D.C., we can ship it to, and that's been great.
Yeah.
So we have 3 ways that people can get Kentucky Senator Bourbon. At a Kentucky retailer distributed by Kentucky Eagle Distributors here in Lexington. They can go to Jack Rose Dining Saloon in the Adams Morgan region of Washington, D.C. They're the only retail location outside of Kentucky that can legally sell our bourbon.
Okay.
Or if you live in a state that allows direct ship, you can go to bourbonoutfitter.com, run again by the guys at Justin's House of Bourbon, and you can buy it there. But I'm really proud of the fact that each release of our bourbon has gone to D.C. and Bill Thomas always buys 5 cases and puts it on sale in the bottle shop there at Jack Rose Dining Saloon.
Nice.
And it's like having Brad Williams do your barrel pick, having your bourbon available at Jack Rose Dining Saloon. It's very good for our brand.
Sure. Yeah, no doubt about that. Well, that's very cool. Well, next time I'm in D.C., I'll have to check it out, right? Of course, I haven't been to D.C. in a long time.
You need to go. The direct flights from Lexington have been restored post-COVID.
Have they really?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I would highly recommend that you make a visit to Jack Rose Dining Saloon. The food is extraordinary, and about 1,700 different whiskeys on the wall, and it's an overwhelming sensory experience if you're a whiskey geek.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. You mentioned COVID, and I was going to maybe talk about that in the 3rd round, but since you brought it up, you guys started the brand. You did your first release in February of 2020, which is when we started our podcast. Oh, was it?
21.
21.
Okay.
21.
But you were right in the middle of COVID.
We were right in the middle of COVID.
Yeah. So, I mean, but you obviously were doing the planning, the strategy before then, and then COVID hits, and it's like, oh, shit. So how did that affect your plans? I mean, what?
Well, it was 2 shits. One was it's COVID. Another one was we have this ticking time bomb on our trademark.
Yeah. Oh.
And how is this all going to play out? Because you have 3 years to use a trademark once you get it.
Okay.
And it took us a while to get rolling. It took us a while to get the money together, and then it took us a while to get the bourbon and figure out where do we get the bottles from and who can do the labels. And and Andre having to go through the myriad of government bureaucracy. You got to get local, state, and federal license approval.
Right.
Everybody's got to get their money.
Yeah. Man, you should have hired an attorney.
Well, our practice now specializes in liquor law.
Do you really? Okay, great.
So I have an associate named Ivy, and she's really taking it up.
Giving Steve McGinnis a run for his money.
Exactly. And we met a lot of great people. I mean, meeting the bottle providers, the label makers, learning, who does what. As I mentioned earlier, meeting some of the different bottlers, working with the guys at Bluegrass Distillers. It's just been it's been a great experience, but it's difficult. I mean, there's probably a place out there for somebody to kind of walk somebody else through all this. It's a lot of moving parts, probably, I'm sure, more than we appreciated. Everything from, you look at a bottle and, there's 10 moving parts in a bottle, of which there's probably 6 different vendors that are necessary to put it together.
Yeah.
We had to buy the bottles and the caps and seals from a company in Frankfurt. What's their name?
Distributed through Frankfurt.
distributed through. It's a national company.
Okay.
Then we get our labels from Turner Labels in Nicholasville. They do a great job. They're pros. We bottle and put the labels on and put them in the cases at Bluegrass Distillers in Lexington.
Right. And
then we use Kentucky Eagle, which has the Central Kentucky region exclusive on Anheuser-Busch distributorship. Mm-hmm. So in the malt beverage business, there are regions that you're handed down from the national distributor.
Yeah.
But wine and spirits aren't that way. And we looked at all the different distributors like Republic and some of the other big ones, Heidelberg. And we went to Kentucky we went to Kentucky Eagle and told them our story, and they jumped right on it because they can distribute wine and spirits statewide. And It just so happens that they were looking to expand their spirits portfolio, and they loved our story, and they've done a great job. And they get our bourbon from Pikeville to Paducah, from Corbin to Covington.
That sounds like, who was it? What was not the grocery store?
Clothing store?
The clothing
Doll
store.
Hairs,
Doll
maybe?
Hairs, yeah, from Pikeville to Paducah. If you listen to UK basketball, right? That was always the ad. But that's great. I mean, that's awesome that they can do that and distribute everything for you guys throughout the state. So let's talk about the brand itself. You mentioned earlier this was a brand that was originally from Krigler and Krigler
in Covington, Northern Kentucky.
All right, and then it moved down to another.
Somehow it made its way to Double Springs Distillers in Bardstown, and we have no idea who that is. We've done extensive research and just couldn't find that much out about it.
Yeah.
But sometime in the 70s, they stopped using it, and so we applied for the trademark. And what do you have to do, Counselor? We have to wait 6 months to see if anybody else claims the brand. What was it?
It's not 6 months. It's 90 days. When it gets published, it's a 60-day publication period.
Okay.
Nobody claimed it, so we own it. We actually, the company is Kentucky Senator Spirits, LLC.
Right.
Andre and I are the 50-50 owners of that.
Right.
And then we license the brand out by release.
Sure.
And Kentucky Senator Spirits is the owner of the brand name Kentucky Senator Bourbon.
Yeah, and that's just really cool. And the fact that you guys are here in Kentucky, obviously, and using Kentucky bourbon to do that. So it's nice that you decided to do that, resurrect the brand, basically, and that you found it. That's the thing. It's kind of cool that you were able to actually find. How did you find that name? I mean, how did you come across that?
My good friend, Senator Jimmy Higdon, who's from Lebanon in Marion County, also represents Nelson County in the state Senate. So he's a big bourbon guy. He likes to brag that 55% of the world's bourbon is aging in his Senate district, which is accurate. And he came in one day and he showed me this label. He said, "Look at Damon, there was a brand called Kentucky Senator Bourbon." And that's where I got the idea from.
Nice. Yeah. Do you have to pay him royalties or anything off it?
Nope. I probably should give him a sample or two.
Yeah, maybe give him a pour once in a while, right? Just to make him happy.
Exactly.
Matt, let's jump up back to the bourbon itself, and let's talk about the palate and the finish. What do you get on that?
I get a real creamy taste right up front. Not just the mouthfeel, but it has like a taste of like a sweet cream or a seasoned cream right up front. Then it's got that nice rye spice we were talking about, sort of the bread aromas and the bread flavors on the nose. It comes through with nice spice, good peppercorn, a little bit of cardamom, like some of those other kind of rye-type baking spices. And then I get some sweetness coming through the end. I think that kind of plays with that banana. To me, it's like vanilla wafer crackers. So there's like the vanilla, there's that little bit of like sweet graham cracker type flavor on the finish as well. And kind of the last thing I'm left with is that vanilla wafer flavor.
Yeah, I can see that for sure, man. That the banana does come through to me on the palate, on the finish especially. I get that spiciness, which I really love. I get a little bit of that. I want to say I can almost taste like the corn a little bit, the grain, in terms of, kind of like that frosted flake flavor that I get on some bourbons. And that's not to say that it's young. It's 6 years old, so it's not like a young grain flavor that I pick up. But just a nice sweetness and a spiciness combined again. The 6-year-old, I mean, it's delicious. I mean, it really is. It's really good. So, Damon, what about you? What do you get in terms of the palate?
It's a little more fruit forward. My favorite bourbon cocktail is bourbon neat or bourbon perhaps with one ice ball. This would because I don't like to use older bourbons and cocktails, I prefer to drink them neat or on the rocks.
Right.
But this would be the one, because it's a little more fruit forward, a little sweeter, that I would suggest people consider using in a cocktail if you must.
Yeah. Andre, what about you?
I don't have the palate that you guys have.
Nope.
I enjoy drinking it. It's pretty good.
That's all you have.
That's all the palate one needs right there.
Yeah,
That's right.
Compared to our first one, I thought it was much lighter, fruitier.
Yeah.
Not quite as much cherry, a little bit more of that banana that we discussed earlier.
Right.
All I know is last summer I went to the Grand Canyon and floated the Grand Canyon for 12 days, and I brought a bottle of of both of the bourbons, of the 15 and of the 6-year-old, and they drink very well in 120 degree weather. But you chill it in the river, so you leave it in the river where it's 52 degrees.
Yeah,
nice.
And then you pull it out where it's 120 degrees, and you just drink them straight.
Yeah.
So, the 6-year we drank a little bit earlier in the evening, and then the 15-year-old we would drink around the fireplace.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. But yeah, this one's again 107 proof, man. This is so nice to drink. It's a very, I hate to say easy drinker. You don't want to say smooth, you don't want to say easy, but it really is. I mean,
It's a good daily drinker.
It really is. I mean, this is something that would be very easy to sit around and drink, and probably, if you're not watching yourself, you might be able to drink a little bit more than you should.
I think there's still a few bottles at Liquor Barn in Hamburg. You're the mayor. I guess you can double check on that for us.
Yeah, there are. I actually checked today, so there are some up there.
It's the only place you'll be able to find it.
Yeah,
I think they held back a case or two or three.
There are some bottles up there if you want to head up to Liquor Barn there in Hamburg. They're behind the counter, so it's on the display.
We like to see our bourbon on the top shelf, behind the counter,
right
underneath the glass.
Yep.
That's the brand we're looking for. Hard to find.
Yep.
A little more expensive.
Yep.
And when it comes out, we want people to rush to the store and buy one to keep and one to drink.
Yeah, which makes sense because that's the theory behind pinhook. At least in my mind, collecting the pinhooks, I always buy two because I want to drink one and enjoy it, and I always want to have one just to keep. And with the different senators, it's a perfect idea to do that with as well. So,
and it's not just different senators. Damon, because he's a marketing genius, also uses a different color.
Yeah, I was seeing that on the bottom labels. Yeah.
So each, eventually we'll have to repeat some colors, I suppose. But in the meantime, the label's the same, but the color palettes are different.
Gotcha. Yep.
And then you have a different senator on the back, and then of course over the next few years we'll have a 8, a 9, a 10 on the stamp as well.
Yeah. Okay. So because you said you bought barrels enough to do how many different?
So here's the plan, and you guys might be the first to know, but
yes,
we're gonna take another 6 barrels in June of 2023 and do an 8-year release.
Okay.
And then in 2024, we're going to take another 6 barrels and do a 9-year release, and that will leave us. We bought 25 barrels, so that will leave us with 1 barrel, and we will do a 10-year-old, literally single barrel.
Okay.
In June of 2025.
Wow.
Now, I can also tell you, and this is pretty fresh information, we have 50 barrels of Green River bourbon that we bought, aging in Owensboro.
Okay. All right.
And it'll be 5 years old once we cycle through the majority of this Barton juice.
Okay.
So we may have to break our 6-year-old bourbon, one term, and on the back end of the juice we're currently drinking, do a 5-year-old release, and we may do a wider release at a lower price point because it'll be 5 years old.
Right, but it was distilled by Jacob and those guys down at Green River. Okay.
Yeah, and it's great juice.
Well, I mean, we've had Jacob on the show, and we've had several of the different expressions he's done. We had Bradshaw bourbon, which, people think, celebrity bourbon, blah, blah, blah. But, man, I really like that. We did the Yellow Banks.
Yep.
Which was done in conjunction with the Kentucky Corn Growers Association. And then I can't remember the other one we had.
I think it was just the Green River Bottled and Bond.
Was it? Okay.
Mistaken.
But I'm telling you, man, Jacob, and I hate to see the news that he has left Green River. So,
yeah, they sold the Bardstown Bourbon Company.
I know. I was excited to see that. I thought, this is great. This could be, really good news. It gives Bardstown some additional capacity. It'll be interesting to see how it works out. And then, unfortunately, like 2 weeks later, got the news that Jacob's leaving.
Well, we've got 50 barrels of his bourbon aging, and
that's great.
It'll turn 3 in August, so it'll turn 5 2 years from August, just in time for us to consider something new in our mix. And we might even wait. We could wait a year and a couple months and do a 6-year. It depends.
Right.
We've got all sorts of options, but we're happy. You know, in our business, in the bourbon business, you've got to always be planning ahead. And you know, as you know, it's a long-term play anytime you do bourbon because of the aging process. And I personally don't want to ever bottle anything that's less than 4 years old. And we will always have an aging statement on our bourbon.
Right.
And the plan would be always to proof it down to 107 as well, as we discussed earlier in the show.
Okay. Well, that's good to know, though, in terms of the transition, you know, to Green River. I mean, because Jacob's has done a great job down there.
We're not hiding the fact that our releases are coming from different distilleries and have different mash bills.
Yeah.
It's all going to be great bourbon, and we're going to tell a great story with each release.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let's get final thoughts on this, Matt. What do you think on the 6-year-old?
Loving it.
Yeah. What do you think compared to the 15?
Completely different.
Yeah.
It's a hard comparison to make.
I agree. But both are equally, I mean, drinkable.
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
enjoyable.
Definitely. They're both very drinkable, and they both hit a different profile altogether.
I think what Andre said was perfect, that, you know, your day drinker, the 6-year-old, sitting around the campfire, hanging out at night, the 15-year-old, it'd be perfect. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great way to kind of sum that up. But yeah, the 6-year-old definitely enjoyed that very much. All right, guys, let's take a quick break, and we'll be back with more with Damon Thayer and Andre Regard from Kentucky Senator Bourbon in just a minute.
Three Chord's line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The 3 Chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they call Perfectly Tuned Taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them together. Find out more about the whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.3chordbourbon.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and final session round. Wait, Matt, what'd you call it?
Term.
Daggone it. Yeah, welcome back to the third term of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark. With me, as always, live tonight in the Bourbon Life Studios is my good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing down there at the end of the Bourbon Life table?
Mark, I am so glad to be back at the Bourbon Life table with some friends around it here. We've got a slew of empty glasses and full bottles. It's like the perfect show.
Yes, it is, man. This is great. Yeah, having a good time tonight. I'm glad. Mm-hmm. I always love having people live in the studio. You know, it's fun to record online when you get to do that because it makes it so convenient. But when you get to sit down with people face-to-face live in person, it makes it totally different experience. So we're really happy that we've got our guests here. Matt, you want to tell everybody who we have with us tonight?
Absolutely. We've got the co-founders of Kentucky Senator Bourbon, Damon Thayer and Andre Regard, and they are back for the third term as well. And we're going to do a little double dose here.
Yeah,
right?
man.
Yeah, a little compare and contrast. So, gentlemen, let's go through what we've got poured up.
Go right ahead. Whoever wants to
kick it off.
Well, so this is the same mash bill as the 6-year-old bourbon.
All right.
So just to repeat that, it is 75% corn, 21% rye, 4% malted barley, always 107 proof, the traditional barrel proof.
Okay.
As you all know, a couple of Pappies are 107 proof. Weller Antique is 107. Baker 7-year is 107. Right. So we're happy to be occupying that space. Fewer bottles. The Angels got more than we thought they would. So we're right around 1,200 bottles, aged 7 years. So not only did the Angels get a little more of our bourbon than we had hoped they would take, but also there is a different flavor profile than the 6-year-old. And if you put the bottles side by side, you can see the difference. The 6-year-old bourbon has a little bit more of a cherry red color to it. Uh-huh. The 7-year-old John G Carlisle release is a little darker, as you would expect, spending another year in the wood.
Yep.
So our third release is the John G Carlisle. As we mentioned earlier, all of our bourbons have a bit of history with them, named after a different U.S. senator from Kentucky. The first one was a little tongue-in-cheek. Of course, Senator Alben Barkley was a vice president of the United States, one of two from Kentucky, and that's wonderful. Senator DeBoe was the first Republican senator. For our third release, we were celebrating the history of Kentucky and our bourbon. This is the 125th anniversary of the Bourbon and Bond Act.
Right.
And the Bourbon and Bond Act.
Bottled and Bond.
The Bottled and Bond Act was the main promoter of that act was John G. Carlisle. He was U.S. Senator and then became Secretary of Treasury. And so while it's not a bottled and bond bourbon, it still is in recognition of the 125th anniversary of the first Consumer Protection Act ever passed in the United States.
And still going strong today.
Yes, it is.
And our first Northern Kentucky senator, Senator Carlisle, is from Covington.
Okay.
The first two senators were from Western Kentucky, Barkley and DeBoe. And Carlisle has an elementary school named for him in Covington.
Okay.
The Carlisle Elementary. And he was quite accomplished, served in multiple offices. He was very close friends with Grover Cleveland, the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. Grover Cleveland was both the 22nd and 24th president of the United States. He lost his first re-election to Benjamin Harrison, who was the grandfather of the 9th president of the United States, William Henry Harrison, who died in office after only a month in office. He contracted pneumonia during his inaugural parade. So Harrison beat Cleveland, and then Cleveland came back 4 years later and was re-elected and became the only non-consecutive president to serve. And then, of course, at the end of that term, gave way in 1896 to William McKinley, who then, in 1900, chose New York Governor Theodore Roosevelt to be his vice president, and the rest is history.
Yep. All right, funny little story. I had an uncle who's passed away and a cousin who's also passed away, but they were actually Grover Cleveland Butler the second and Grover Cleveland Butler the third. So just little tidbit there to throw out there. Nobody cares, right?
Cleveland was an interesting guy. He started out as a sheriff in Buffalo, New York.
Yeah,
that's where he's from, and then he became governor of New York. And then president of the United States. And the Republicans had an amazing run from Lincoln all the way until Coolidge. Mm-hmm. And the only 2 Democrats to serve during that time were Cleveland, who served the 2 non-consecutive terms, and then, of course, Woodrow Wilson, the first modern-day true liberal Democrat to be president of the United States. So that was quite a thing for Cleveland to become president, and Carlisle was his pal. Carlisle was also in the Kentucky House of Representatives. He was a state senator where I currently serve. He was lieutenant governor. He was a member of Congress and Speaker of the House of the United States House of Representatives.
Okay,
but also became a U.S. senator and then later Secretary of the Treasury, as Andre noted.
Yeah, and this is the same mash bill as you mentioned earlier. 7-year-old 107 proof. Andre, you're going to jump in there. I'd cut you off.
I was just going to say, I think I mentioned it earlier. Now since we're going to different areas of the state, we've actually had people call us from Northern Kentucky. There's a lot of very proud people up there who are happy that we picked a U.S. senator from Northern Kentucky representing the northern part of the state. So it's kind of neat as we go through these releases. We haven't done a Central Kentucky one yet, so we're looking forward to doing that and go through different parts of the state. So that's part of the brand. It's part of the brand idea. This dose of American history, U.S. history, Kentucky history with good Kentucky bourbon.
Well, now as a native Eastern Kentuckian, I'm just going to throw it out there that you need to find if there is a senator. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anybody, but if you know of anybody that was a senator from Eastern Kentucky, you need to, throw that out there. So
we are always searching for good ideas. We've tried to alternate Democrat, Republican, and Democrat.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll be looking for a Republican for next year's release. The list is short.
Yeah.
And here's the issue. The law in Kentucky says if someone has been dead for more than 50 years, you can use their name, image, and likeness. If they've been dead for less than 50 years, we have to get permission from the family.
From the family.
And a lot of the Republicans, like John Sherman Cooper and Marlowe Cook, they've been dead for less than 50 years. So also my political mentor from Northern Kentucky is the late, great Jim Bunning, 2-term U.S. Senator.
Sure.
His family has already said to me, whenever you want to name one of your releases for Jim, you've got our permission.
Yeah.
And that'll be a really cool thing for me, because I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for Senator Jim Bunning. Of course, baseball fans will know him as a member of the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Right.
He pitched for both the Detroit Tigers from the home state of Matt and me. And he also pitched for the Philadelphia Phillies. He pitched a perfect game. He pitched a no-hitter and was one of the greatest pitchers of all time.
Yeah. Very cool story that a lot of people don't realize.
So, at some point there will be a bourbon name for Jim Bunning. We just don't know when. Yeah. But we're always open to suggestions.
Very, very cool. So Matt, let's talk about, because we've got 2 poured up. Actually, we've got the small batch 7-year-old, and then we've also got the single barrel from Liquor Barn that I picked up, which is the same release number 3, but it is a single barrel from Liquor Barn. So Matt, what do you pick up? Go ahead and talk about both of them if you want to.
I've only started with a small batch, so I'll start with that one.
All right.
But on the nose, I pick up some citrus zest, like tangerine or like apricot type, kind of like some sort of an orange fruit, but certainly not as pungent as an orange. And then I get a lot of almond. There's like a sweet honey almond. I don't want to say that word marzipan, but like this baked.
I have no idea what marzipan is, but I love it when he says it.
There's like a baked, the type of aroma that almonds get when they're baked, like a roast almond.
Yeah, I get it.
Type aroma on it as well that I'm picking up, and then a little bit more oak with this one on the nose as well. I think a little bit of the age comes through too.
Yeah, I definitely pick up a little more of the oak, and it's not, the other one I was picking up the kind of the cherry that we talked about. This one I agree, there's a little more citrus that comes through on the nose, Matt. So yeah, I've not really done much with the single barrel. We can come back to visit that, but it's gonna be fun to kind of compare these two against each other. So Andre, Damon, what do you guys get in terms of the nose on the 7-year-old small batch?
I get a little bit more of the oak coming out on this one.
Okay.
And some of the citrusy flavors that Matt mentioned earlier. I agree.
Yep.
I admit to being a bourbon lover who does not have a great palate.
Yeah.
But it's certainly not as sophisticated as Matt's. I love the nose on this bourbon. I mean, it's strong. I mean, it gets you.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a true bourbon lover, you're going to love the nose on this bourbon. Now, a bourbon virgin might knock them back into their seat, right? But it's strong.
Yeah.
I think it is more oaky. It's been an extra year in the wood.
Right.
And for whatever reason, we were hoping for a 4 to 5% loss. We lost about 10%, was it, Andre? Yeah. So, the Angels really liked it too.
But of course, as we mentioned earlier, when you're sourcing barrels or getting barrels out of a rick house, some barrels that have more, you look at the barrel and some of them have a lot more character to them. Well, character usually means maybe you have a few drips here and a few drips there, and that's what gives that gnarly look.
Right.
And there's no question that the single barrel was probably the gnarliest barrel we took out.
It had leaks and cracks.
Yeah.
Yeah, covered in barnacles.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So you're certainly going to lose a little bit there. And with only doing 6 barrels per release, if we get one barrel that's a little bit short, it's going to have a pretty significant effect on our total production.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. So that's kind of given in. Damon and I are really loving what we're doing. We're enjoying it. The folks that are part of our team that are helping us do this are having a great time. And certainly we want to grow the brand and be a player at some point in the market. But for now, we're doing releases that are large enough to get pretty widespread distribution throughout the state and even throughout the country through our online distribution. So it's just been a lot of fun and picking out these different flavors. But with only 6 barrels per release, you can have a lot of variation.
Right. So you got the barrels and you blended this down at Bluegrass. Is that where the blending takes place as well for the bottle?
That's correct.
Okay.
So full disclosure, we talked about the fact that this bourbon likely came from Barton,
right?
Where it's been its first 6 years. When we bought those 25 barrels, we moved them to Bardstown Bourbon Company.
Oh, did you? Okay.
And that's where these barrels are aging.
Okay.
And as we noted and I'm going to continue to say it, the angels at Bardstown Bourbon Company are pretty greedy types.
Yeah. So Andre, did your ex-wife's husband's, did he come and move the barrels in his truck down to to Bluegrass Distillers for you? Or did you guys?
No, it was a little bit more routine.
Okay. All right. You guys.
By the way, Andre left out a key part of that story in segment 1.
Uh-oh.
It cost him a bottle of Eagle Rare 10-year.
Gotcha.
To his ex-wife's boyfriend. Now, that is a good business partner.
Yeah.
When he will take a bottle of Eagle Rare 10-year from his collection and give it to his ex-wife's boyfriend to transport our tote across New Circle Road in freezing temperature, that's how you know that he's a good partner.
Nice.
I think you deal worked out in your favor getting that 15-year that we tasted out of this.
Yeah.
Not having to worry about any trademark issues,
losing the trademark on Kentucky Senator
tote for too long. I think you did all right for yourselves on that one.
So Damon, let's talk about some legislation, talk about some things, because you've been in the Senate now. You've been there almost 20 years, right?
Correct.
All right. So talk about some things that have gone on, because let's just talk about bourbon in general, because I'm a native Kentuckian. Growing up, bourbon was like, it's bourbon. I come to school at UK, and it's like, okay, I love to drink bourbon at the football games. And it wasn't really until I got older, practicing law and getting out in the business world, understanding really what bourbon meant to the state of Kentucky. And it's huge. Can you talk about, bourbon, its impact on the state, tourism, but then also some legislation, things that have changed recently that have really helped our distillers here?
Sure can, but I want to offer the following disclaimer, because I've been asked it, and we got a great start because Fred Minnick wrote a story about us in Forbes.com, and he asked me, the Forbes Online, he asked me the question about being a Kentucky state senator promoting a brand called Kentucky Senator. I want your listeners to know that before I even got this thing going, I got written approval from the Kentucky Legislative Ethics Commission to do it, as long as I don't use my own likeness.
Right.
Which I would never do. Who would want to buy a bottle with my likeness on it? I mean, I have a face made for radio and podcast, Mark. And as long as I'm not promoting the Kentucky State Senate.
Okay.
The other thing is, people say, well, how can you vote on it? And I can continue to vote on bourbon legislation that affects the entire bourbon industry. If there were a bill that just helped Kentucky Senator Bourbon, which there wouldn't be, I would have to recuse myself from voting. But every bill we pass affects the entire industry. So I can continue to work on bourbon legislation and do. So the whole thing started back during the Steve Beshear administration, when a deal was cut to raise the hidden wholesale tax. And you may remember bourbon distillers coming and pouring out bourbon on, I can remember Jimmy Russell and Bill Samuels pouring out bourbon on the steps of the Capitol. The image of that now makes me cry.
Sure.
I voted against that tax increase.
Yeah.
It passed. It was the Steve Beshear tax increase. I voted no. And that sort of began because I'm a low tax guy.
Sure.
And we're paying that hidden wholesale tax in Kentucky with every bottle of bourbon or spirits that you buy, unfortunately. And that started sort of my relationship with the bourbon industry, and I work with the Kentucky Distillers Association. And we have passed a myriad of legislation over the years. The Dusty Bottles Act that allows, for you to resell the vintage. We call it dusty bottles or vintage spirits. The cocktails at distilleries. I mean, do you know, as recently as 5 years ago, you couldn't go to Woodford Reserve and have a cocktail.
Isn't that crazy? Just absolutely crazy.
And you've seen what's happened there with now they all offer food.
Sure.
They're building a small boutique hotel at Maker's Mark. I mean, and they're hiring the best chefs and offering food. Those sorts of things. The direct shipping, it's called DTC, direct to consumer. We passed a law making direct to consumer legal in Kentucky. We need to get some other states, like California, for example, which they're happy when we buy their wine, but they won't let us sell their bourbon in there. Yeah. I mean, but that's what happens when you have a communist state. But now that's for a different
podcast.
That's for a different podcast. I don't call it the People's Republic of California for nothing. So lots of those sorts of bills. Just this year, the Andy Beshear administration lawyers, I believe, wrongly interpreted the statute and came to us and said, this barrel select program is illegal.
Yeah, that was a huge thing
And so we had to pass a bill
that said,
specific. And I still believe that the ABC was wrong, but sometimes the Bashir administration lawyers like to prove that they got a law degree or something. I don't know. You guys will have to speak to that because us non-lawyers don't care about that shit. But so we had to pass a bill to protect the barrel pick program, but we also got some other things in there that will allow sampling to take place at fairs and festivals and things like that. So really good to help the craft distillers especially build their brands.
Yeah.
And people have said to me, well, you're in competition with those guys. I'm like, well, hey, first of all, I've swore an oath to the Constitution of Kentucky and to the United States Constitution. And that is my first, when I make a vote, it's to uphold that vow. And I want to do what's right for the bourbon business. And I love seeing new brands come on the market. I'm like, the more the merrier.
Yeah.
So as a bourbon purveyor, I love seeing these new brands come on the market. I don't view it as competition. We're out there building our own niche, and I'm happy. Like I saw Coach Stoops a couple months ago, and he's of course the main man behind the Tar brand, and I think that's great.
Or RD1. It's now called RD1.
RD1.
Yeah.
Yep.
They've changed the name to RD1.
I don't know why.
Registered Distillery 1, because they were their first registered distillery in Lexington. So,
but anybody new that wants to try this,
right? Yeah.
My advice would be, don't put Kentucky on the label. Buy some good MGP juice. It's out there and available, and start. And by the way, that's what New Riff did. That's what Old Scout did. That's what Boone County did.
They
all started their brand with MGP juice.
There's so many brands out there. People we've had on the show that they've gone to MGP or now Ross and Squibb is what it's called now, because
it's always MGP to me, or even Seagram's, old
Seagram's.
Yeah,
there you go, the old Seagram's, right? But yeah.
But the environment for bourbon is very good in Kentucky. We distill 95% of the world's bourbon, but there are other states like Texas, Colorado, New York, Wyoming that want to chip away at our market share, and we need to continue to be vigilant.
Yeah.
The big push from the Kentucky Distillers Association will be to do something to give them some relief on the ad valorem tax.
Yeah.
That is charged for every year you age bourbon in Kentucky. So a bottle of 23-year Pappy, one of the big reasons it's $3.25 at retail is because they have to pay taxes on it for 23 individual years.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast too, probably, isn't it?
It is.
Well, Damon mentioned some of the legislation, like the buying of cocktails at the distilleries. I mean, one of the things, I'm involved a little bit in tourism in the state, and the effect of the bourbon industry on tourism in Kentucky, it's unbelievable.
Sure.
And it's unlike California, where it's somewhat restricted to Sonoma or Napa. Now in Kentucky, it's the whole state. Doesn't matter whether you're in Louisville, Bardstown, Lebanon, Somerset. Now we're going to northern Kentucky with New Riff, Lexington. From my house near Midway, within 20 minutes, I can go to 6 distilleries. I forget Wild Turkey's there. It's 20 minutes away.
Right.
So the impact of the bourbon industry on Kentucky is part of our true heritage. And I'm really excited, I think Damon is as well, that we get to participate in that heritage in our state and also to help grow it and expand it and expose it to other people.
And I'd like to point out that neither Andre or I were born in Kentucky, but we came here as soon as we could.
That's great. We welcome you guys with open arms and appreciate what you're doing. So Matt, let's jump back to this 7-year-old small batch. What do you get in terms of the palate and the finish on this one?
It's got the heat. I'm feeling the heat coming with this one a little bit more. There's a good little bit of alcohol burn right up front. Certainly not an unwelcome amount, but just nice. It lets you know it's there, and then it lends into some cinnamon, and I'm getting like a kind of a sweet, dry type flavor that you would get from like honeycomb, actual honeycomb itself. If you've ever like chewed on a little piece of honeycomb, there's like that sweetness, but a little bit of like a drying heat that lingers with it. And then kind of some spice or some freshness from like ginger root, kind of like that fresh ginger, kind of the heat that would come with it. And then a little oak down the line too.
Yeah.
The age shows up on the finish.
Yeah, this finish goes on for quite a while, I think, much more so, I think, than even the 6-year-old, even though it's the same mash bill, it's just a year older. But it's a totally different animal than what the 6-year-old is. I think, guys, Andre, Damon, what do you guys think?
I think it's very spicy.
Yeah.
And if you're a bourbon, again, like I said with the nose, if you're a bourbon lover, I think you're really going to like drinking this neat.
So would you say that's your favorite of the three? I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm kind of getting that vibe, Damon.
I haven't been able to drink as much of it because it just came out last month.
Right.
But after going through the tasting and, perhaps sampling a little bit when we were bottling and then tasting a bit at home, I really like it. And what I'm really excited about is we're going to get an 8 and a 9-year release out of this. Yeah. And then if there's anything left, we're going to have one single barrel left in year 10.
Yeah.
And, I don't know what we'll do in terms of distribution. It'll probably be limited availability at 2 liquor barn locations or something because there might only be 120 bottles of it.
I'll be there. Ben.
Can you imagine? We're launching this brand and we're going to do a 1-barrel, single barrel release of a 10-year bourbon in 3 years.
Great. Yeah, that's
good. So I'm just really excited about how this bourbon has aged.
It'll be think about this, like going to Jack Rose and getting a flight of the 6, 7, 8, and 9. And getting to compare those head to head, knowing it's same mash, it's same thing plus a year,
same distillate, same mash bill
to run the whole line.
Same proof.
The Senator, that'll be a fun experience.
There are places in town that you can do that. Dudley's has been a big supporter of mine. I don't know if they drained their early bottles or not. The Amsden in Versailles. Local Feed, my favorite restaurant where I live in Georgetown.
Right.
They've had it right from the start. And there are other places around town. If you look for it, we're not as, I know Malone's has had some of our juice as well. Because it's such a small release, we're more in liquor stores and less in bars and restaurants. But there are a few out there where you might be able to find a flight, or at least the latest release.
All right. Very nice. Matt, what do you think about this single barrel compared to that one?
Well, Andre, what did you think?
Oh, I'm sorry, Andre. I apologize.
As I said earlier, I agree with Damon. I think this release has a lot going on. If you're sitting around a table with a bunch of folks who are trying a bourbon, it's got enough that everybody's going to have a different opinion of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's got a lot of things going on, a lot of different flavors. I think you can find a lot of different things in it if you're looking for it. So in that true kind of bourbon way of all these different flavors coming out, I think this definitely brings it to the table.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, Damon, I might be there with you on that one. I mean, the 15-year-old was really good. That 6-year-old was really good. But this 7-year-old small batch, this might be the winner of the night so far for me. I'm not sure. Yeah, I know we got the single barrel. So let's jump to that single barrel, and you've had the time to nose it. What do you get?
So this is one of the 7 original barrels.
6.
Okay, one of 6.
So correct. 5 barrels constituted the small batch.
Okay,
this was single barrel.
Okay. One single barrel. All
so
right.
we pulled all 6, and then Brad and his crew came over, and we got to join them. And of those 6, we picked one to become the single barrel, and then the other ones got batched into the batch.
Yeah. Wow.
And it was a great experience. We've done this twice now with Brad.
Nice.
And we're learning a ton. And we're so happy that he's actually joined us in person, not just send me some samples and I'm going to pick something. He comes, he spends 2 or 3 hours with us.
We basically get a half a day from him because he's got to drive from Louisville and back. And, like Andre said, he's there for 2-3 hours. And he's such a great guy. He involves everybody in the tasting, and it's really cool.
Yeah. Well, if he ever doesn't want to use the gas money on the drive or anything,
just let us know. We'll be happy to come down and join you guys.
It's right around the corner.
That's right.
That's right. Just right downtown.
Well, this is fun. This one really is fun because I think the nose on this is quite different than what we're drinking in the batch. This has a lot more leather, a lot more oak.
Yeah.
Almost like more earthy, smoky, almost like an
older bourbon.
Yeah, it like has that dusty kind of like that weird, pleasant funk to it.
I agree.
But then there's also like I'm picking up some similarities coming across. Like there's a floral, like honeysuckle, kind of like a springtime sweetness to it as well, to contrast all like these dark and like really rich, robust aromas.
So I see what happened. Brad went down and his crew, they tasted every barrel, and Brad was like, "That is the best one. I'm taking that one because it's such a different barrel." So that's why we ended up with this one, right?
It was very different, and of the 3 releases, but really 5 that we have now, it's
Right.
different flavor profiles. I think this is just an incredible bourbon.
Yeah, I was happy. I picked it up today, as a matter of fact, and it's available at Liquor Barn.
I'm heading there after we record this.
Okay.
They might be closed at this hour, but because we're recording in the evening. But this release is available only at Liquor Barn, Party Mart,
Right.
and Depths, and the 23 locations around Kentucky. And I don't know if they've got any of it left. They bought all of the single barrel, obviously, and they bought a bunch of our small batch too. So I know they've got the small batch left because it's only been out a couple of weeks, but the single barrel does go pretty fast.
Yep.
And I just think if like you're a bourbon rookie and you knows this thing, it is going to set you back. It is going to set you back hard in your chair.
Yeah.
Which means most bourbon connoisseurs should really like
Really
it.
enjoy it. Yep, I agree. Yeah. So let me go back and say, I said that, of the 3 that we had, the 7-year-old small batch was probably my favorite. I'm thinking that the single barrel is probably, I'm going to agree with Brad.
Look at the legs on it. I mean, look at the legs
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
on the glass. I mean, it's pretty cool.
definitely. So, Damon, earlier we kind of talked about the future. We didn't really talk about it. We brought it up. So let's talk about the future. What does that look like? You guys can tell us what's going to go on with the brand. What do
Something
you?
went wrong. Please try again.
Not sure what that was.
That was my Instagram. I was searching for Liquor Barn locations.
That was not our brand.
That was not.
something went
That was
wrong.
my Instagram talking back to me.
that was
This is Damon putting in an order at liquorbarn.com. Yeah.
So the future. So the future of the brand is something went wrong.
Nothing's going wrong. Everything, Frank, that's a good pivot point.
There you
It's
go.
gone so well for us. We're just pinching ourselves. And like I said, we're going to do a 7-year and an 8-year, an 8-year and a 9-year release on this current juice, and then a single barrel, a literally 1 barrel 10-year release 3 years from now in 2025.
Nice.
Sometime in there, then we will get into the stash of bourbon that we have at Green River. It'll be bottled at 4.5, maybe 5 years, maybe 6 years. So we've got enough to stage out for quite a number of years. But phase 2 is something that Andre and I are working on. We've got to raise the money to do our own juice.
Yeah.
Just like, and I looked to, my friend Ken Lewis up at New Riff, what he did.
Yeah.
And of course he has a distillery. We don't have $15 million to build a
Right,
distillery.
right.
But if we can raise the money,
But you can raise it.
that's the goal. We raise the money and
There you
we start laying down our own juice.
There you go.
And we may do that with Bluegrass Distillers. They have a new facility that they're going to be building
Midway.
in Midway.
In Midway, yep.
We could also do it at Castle and Key. We could also do it at Bardstown Bourbon Company. Our first choice, if they're ready when we're ready, our first choice would be Bluegrass Distillers, but there are other options. We'll come up with our own mash bill and lay down some juice, and 4 years or 5 years later, like Castle and Key did,
Sure.
we'll release our own juice under this brand.
Nice.
I think our goal would be to get to the point where we have a shelf brand,
Yeah. Right.
that's readily accessible while we continue to take some of the better stuff, age it longer, have different expressions. Maybe, who knows what the future holds as far as what's out there and what's available. But eventually we would like to get to the point of having a shelf brand.
So always focus on bourbon, or is there a move? Maybe rye? Is it? Look at Damon's got a sly grin over there. So
I like where this is going.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
congressmen only serve 2-year terms.
Exactly right.
Governors are 4 years.
There you go.
We've
Yeah.
been thoughtful about this.
Okay.
There are lots of ways we could go with this.
Yeah, yeah, and a 2-year-old rye, or even a 4-year-old rye. Yeah, you can't beat that. If you were to do that, I'm not going to say that you're doing that, but if you were to do that, would it be Kentucky rye, or would you source from somebody else, or what would your plan be? Can you say if you were hypothetically speaking?
Personally, I think that as long as it's got Kentucky in the name, Kentucky Senator, Kentucky Governor, Kentucky Representative, Kentucky Congressman,
Right.
it's going to be a Kentucky a Kentucky juice. That's
Okay.
As Damon mentioned, we're both transplants to Kentucky. We're both big believers in Kentucky. We believe in what we do here. We believe in our industry. We believe in South starts here. It's a great state. It's got great stories, and we want to help tell that story.
Yeah, we're transplants, but I mean, all of our kids were born here,
Right.
And we love this state. We love the history and tradition of Kentucky bourbon, and there's the possibility of some brand extensions, but that's probably all to quote Forrest Gump, that's all I have to say about that.
I think that's great. So I'm glad to hear that, and maybe that's another show down the road.
We hope so.
Yeah, that would be great. So Matt, let's talk about the palate and the finish on this one.
Talk about some heat.
Yeah,
This one throws it at you.
yeah, but it's good. It's nice.
Oh, it's
isn't
great.
It?
It's got that nice warm cinnamon, a little bit of the pepper on it as well. And I'm picking up like a lot of honey lemon, like a nice honey lemon herbal tea. Once you get past some of that heat, it's like almost like hot toddy-ish.
Yeah,
with the sweetness on it, and then again that the heat comes through on the finish, the oak comes through on the finish, that leather and the tobacco are in there on the finish. Just the age really shines through at the end. But yeah, this one really stands out. This is like, this is the banger.
Yeah,
of the bunch.
This is a nice pickup. Andre, go ahead. You're going to say something.
I was going to say I hadn't really thought of the hot toddy expression, but I agree. It's that honey, a little bit of lemony citrus. Mm-hmm. Honey, but it really, it's there. Yeah. I think it's just a fantastic bourbon. It's one that if for a more sophisticated drinker, they're going to find a lot of things in it. They're going to find things to like, things they can comment on.
Yeah, I'm going to have to email Brad after the show tonight and be like, I know what you did.
It's great that this one, I don't want to say was hidden in the batch, but that this one really got to shine outside of the batch. Just so different from what we tasted in the small batch.
What's really cool is to watch Brad go through the tastings and then narrow them down and talk about them. And it's great. We had like 20 people there probably at this one. And he takes everybody through his decision-making process. We've got some great pictures of him that we've posted and we'll continue to post on social media of him looking up at the legs and looking at the color of the bourbon. And he's just such a master at his trade.
He really is.
We're so lucky that he's done these 2 single barrel picks, and we hope that continues to be the case. We have, we appreciate all of our retailers, whether they buy 1 case or 3 cases or 50 cases. But it's definitely great for our brand to have Brad Williams and Liquor Barn doing this single barrel store pick. And I really appreciate Matt's comments on these because, we felt pretty confident about this bourbon, but this is not my dad's friend's Crown Royal or Canadian Club. I mean, this is, and there's only 11 or 1,200 bottles available to the public. This is for a serious bourbon drinker.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. And it's delicious. This single barrel is great. And they did have some bottles left up there. I'm just going to tell you, Damon, today when I picked this one up. So it might be something to go up and buy another bottle or 2 just to have, because this is one I could definitely enjoy drinking on a regular basis.
Andre and I do that frequently. We go to retailers and buy our bourbon back for our own collection. Because, the company... So all the bourbon has to go through the distributor according to the 3-tier system. So we actually, our company buys back bottles from Kentucky Eagle, and we use them for marketing purposes and things like that. We never got to do any launch parties during COVID.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So we've got our first launch party in Covington next month at Smoke Justice, which is an amazing bourbon bar in downtown Covington.
Well, I hope the Bourbon Life, is put on that media list.
It just occurred to me when you said that, Damon, this is a COVID launch. So we have had a successful brand launch during a time period when nobody could go out and drink.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's crazy. To think that you guys have done that and you've had the success that you've had, that's great. And it's a testament to what you guys are doing and the bourbon that you're releasing, for sure.
Yeah.
It's August 10th at 6:00 at Smoke Justice in Covington, by the way. All are welcome.
That sounds like a good plan. So, guys, we should probably wrap it up. We've run over, and I'm sorry we kept you guys so long, but we've had a great conversation. Obviously enjoyed some great bourbon tonight. But before we wrap it up and send it home, you guys anything you want to add or say? Where can people find you guys and your products? We've talked about that a little bit, but
so if they want to learn everything about the brand, go to KentuckySenatorBourbon.com, and there's everything you need to know about it on there: reviews, photos, history of each senator. We on the back label, there's a small paragraph that I write, and then if you go to the website, there's a QR code on the back label. You can go to the website and get a longer bio on each U.S. senator. We really want to put that history out there. We're also on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, Kentucky Senator Bourbon, and we try to keep it fresh and interesting on there. And there's a link to email Andre and me on our website. We're going to be around, we hope, for a long time, continuing to build this brand. And we want to thank all of our partners along the way, and ultimately we want to thank the consumers who purchase our product, whether it be at a liquor store, retailer, or at a restaurant or a bar. And just remember, Kentucky Senator Bourbon, serving up great Kentucky bourbon with a side of Kentucky history.
Very nice. Andre, anything to add to that?
This Friday, I'll be in Washington, D.C. drinking some Kentucky Senator Jack Roses. So
nice.
Damon has been so nice to allow me to get involved in this with him, and it's been a great experience. And, from Louisiana, you wouldn't have bourbon if it wasn't for Louisiana, because it had to go down the river. It had
That's
to
right.
up in Louisiana. So all these little links that you find as you go through life are kind of cool. So it's just been a great experience.
Now, we should probably have another episode where we debate, did it really come from Bourbon and Bourbon County, or was it really from Bourbon Street? But we won't get into that.
Or did it really come from Maysville, or did Elijah Craig start it in Georgetown?
Yeah, we could have a whole discussion on that, right?
Well, I've learned that Bourbon Street is named after Bourbon County now, because there were so many barrels of bourbon.
Okay.
They called it Bourbon Street.
Okay.
That's where the barrels were.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, because I've heard the other way. So that's good to know. Matt, before we wrap it up, man, anything you want to add?
Hey, guys, thanks for serving up a good homage to both Kentucky history, Kentucky past, Kentucky present, and our staple product here, the bourbon. It's been really great. It's been great to spend the night with both of you talking about this and drinking the product that you're bringing to the public, and just having a good time. We always appreciate the company as much and probably more than the product. So thank you both for just being so approachable and really showing your love and your passion in it.
Thanks for having us on the Bourbon Life.
Yeah, we appreciate it. So before I wrap it up, though, Damon, will we see a bottle of Kentucky Senator named after Damon Thayer, U.S. Senator, anytime soon?
I think that's unlikely, but, as any good politician would say, I never rule out any option.
Okay. All right.
All right. We've got two very good U.S. senators. I'm close with both of them. I'm a fan of both of them. So, but I can say when one of them decides not to run, a lot of my Republican friends will be looking at that seat if it comes open. And it's possible that I might be one of them. It's also possible that I'm not going to be one of them.
Okay. Well, there you have it. Well, guys, we appreciate you hanging out with us tonight. We've had a great time learning about you both, but also learning about the brand and your bourbon. Really enjoyed this session. Thanks for joining us here live in the studio tonight. It's just been a lot of fun. Matt, it's just been a great night. So thank you guys very much. We do want to thank all of our sponsors. We appreciate all their support. And also our listeners, we appreciate everything you guys do for us. You can always follow us on Instagram and Facebook, The Bourbon Life. Join our private Facebook group, The Bourbon Lifers. We'd love to have you as a part of that. Leave us a review if you can on your favorite podcasting platform. We'd really appreciate that, as long as it's a 5-star. If you're going to criticize us, no, I'm just kidding. Go ahead. Tell us what you really think. If you want to reach out to us, you can email us at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And with that said, I want to wrap it up, send us on with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the bourbon life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the bourbon life.